Guyana, also of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm not saying they're on the right path because they're currently in office. And I don't have any reason to curry favor with them. In this developmental journey, with this blessing, this opportunity we have with oil and natural gas in Guyana. Every single person in Guyana, every single person in the Caribbean, in the families, everybody, the schools, the churches, the community organizations, the media, everybody, we have a role to play. The state can regulate, the state can help with redistributive justice, but the state cannot create families, and families are important for development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Gonzalez. We're moving now from the islands back to the mainland. In this movement, we're also moving from the elder statesman to the young statesman. I didn't know that Prime Minister Gonzalez knew his scripture so well. But I suppose that the context of 1 Chronicles 12:32 really sets the stage for President Irfaan Ali. Prime Minister Gonzalez. I don't want to say too much, but it formed the center of a discourse last Sunday morning, so it was very familiar, sir. But the idea that we need leadership for the times, I think, is exemplified by President Irfaan Ali, and I understand that exactly what Prime Minister Gonzalez was talking about are the things that we who know and follow President Irfaan Ali recognize in him. And so we could really define what he is going to do now as leadership for the times. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfaan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you very kindly. I promise you that I'll be precisely on time in accordance with my watch. But I have a problem. I just realized the watch is not working. My distinguished friends, Prime Minister Gonzalez, Prime Minister Rowley, former President Dugue, or Prime Minister Mark Phillips, or Vice President, members of Cabinet, Chancellor, members of the Judiciary, partners in development, and you're all our partners in development. Allow me, first of all, to welcome you on behalf of the government and people of Guyana, those of you who are visiting us, to welcome you to Guyana, a land in which the people are humble, hospitable, and a land in which you can enjoy many wonderful things, including our food and our beautiful culture. What's most important, a land in which the people are connected to what we do. Today, I believe we have been blessed with some excellent presentations, and I want to endorse all the presentations. In local terms, you will say, them by don't say everything already, what me say. To translate that to those of our visitors, it is basically, they have said everything. What more can I add? But they've also opened a very important And that is, where do we position Guyana in the global realities? And how is Guyana positioned and connected to the global realities? I've said before that we are building a country to function in a world and an economy 2030 and beyond. The next 7 years is about building a country that has the competitive characteristics and the broadness in scope to be viable, resilient, and sustainable in a world 2030 and beyond. That is the mission we are on, building a country that is functional in a world 2030. To do that, we have to understand the world that we're living in. And I want to position to all those who spoke earlier, that maybe the time is right after the conference in Trinidad and now in Guyana for a new world coalition that seeks to address exactly what we addressed this morning. Build a coalition to bring balance to the international debate around the issue of climate change, food security, and energy security. Because we all agree that these are the three main challenges that we must confront. But we cannot confront these challenges in isolation of the actors within the challenge themselves. So how is it that we can lead a new world effort in building a coalition that addresses these three challenges that the world we live in will face, is facing, and will face in a more severe manner? Very important issues. And we don't have to be self-righteous on this issue. I speak to you from a position of an oil-producing country that will continue to produce oil, that will accelerate our effort to extract the natural resource we have been blessed with and convert it to the development of our people. I also speak to you from a country that has one of the best environmental credentials in the world. And it is not by accident that we have this credential. It is part of what we have been naturally blessed with. You see, there are many who speak today on the virtues of climate change and environmental issues. But I ask them to develop a single policy that can use the natural and national asset of a country in the terms of a forest to be a revenue earner. They would not design anything for you. So the question is, how does the balance allow us to realize the value of what we have while sustaining it for the future? That is a big question. The size of the world forest is 406 billion hectares. The value is about $30 trillion in carbon credit. I'm not going even to biodiversity because that is another level of value. I'm talking about the carbon. $20 trillion US. That should be the debate. How do we catalyze that value? Who is going to pay? Guyana's forest size is 18 million hectares. The value of our forest carbon is US $162 billion. And when I say to you, we're not speaking from a position of inaction, let me explain to you what I mean. The current voluntary carbon market credit for the world is $300 billion per year. Guyana is 500 million. But what is it we have in actual agreements? The total world in actual agreements for this carbon credit has a value of $2 billion US. $2 billion US. Guyana has a value of $750 million US in sign agreement for the next 10 years. That is 40% of what the world has in signed agreement. What do we do as a country? I say we celebrate this accomplishment because this was and is visionary, proactive, sustainable, and it catalyzes the value of our natural resources. When then President and now Vice President and the team conceived the idea of the low carbon development strategy, it was a strategy geared at earning revenue whilst presenting a global model on sustainability. And that was pre-oil. Let us make no mistake. That was pre-oil. Some people say that oil changes the outlook of a country. What was the first thing we did when we got back into government? We further elaborated the strategy into LCDS 2030, taking the new realities, acting in accordance with the time. We did not renege. We did not make a 360 turn. We further enhanced the low carbon development strategy as a main actor in the development platform of our country. That is commitment. That is true commitment. That is adding value. That is staying true to morals and principles when it comes to the issue of climate change. Now I want to also, because we're doing something very good today, we are bringing a realistic positioning of issues. In 2020, the 10 largest economies in the world accounted for 62.7% of global CO2 emissions. The 10 largest accounted for 62.7%. The OECD countries accounted for 33.4%. The countries of Africa accounted for 3.9%. South America, Central America, and the Caribbean combined accounted for 3.6%. So where is the problem? Why aren't the headlines about the 10 largest economies that account for 62.7% of CO2? Suddenly the 3.6% bears the blunt of the headline. What we have in our societies and in our region, people who consider themselves self-righteous, but does not base their argument on the facts and the circumstances, but they appeal to the emotive being of people. That is okay. But realism and reality is what guides policy making and policymakers. Not guessing. If you're going to make policies that has depth and can withstand scrutiny, it must be based on the evidence. Let me proceed with some evidence. If it is that we want to decarbonize the world, and I believe in this, I believe that and I'll demonstrate to you what we are doing, not only to be net zero, but to be carbon negative, but more importantly, to move to renewables, as President Duque very eloquently presented. What we heard today was in crisis. What did the world do? Fire back the coal plants. So as I speak to you today, 25% of the energy in the world is produced from coal plants. That's the highest emitter. 25%. It might be a bit more now. So the first question I want to put to the conference and the global community, tell me how we are going to remove that 25% from coal plants. That's the first priority. If we are going to remove and want to reduce emission, we have to start from the highest form of emission, and that is coal. President Dugue will tell you that when the world reached a crisis, a coal industry, the largest reserve in Colombia that was shut down, was reopened to help the world. So let us use this headline. Give us the strategy as to how we will bring energy from coal to zero. So first, transition from coal to fossil, because fossil fuel is less emission. And then I'm going to give you empirically, based on the evidence before us, what is the global reality? What is the global reality? Oil, 29%, natural gas, 22%, and hydropower, 6%. So that's the first question. Let's address coal. Let's have the strategy for coal. And what is the second reality? The second reality is that global oil demand is expected to reach a record high of 101.7 million barrels per day in 2023. That's what the literature is telling me. I'm not making this up. This represents an increase of 1.9 billion barrels per day. 1.9 million barrels per day. This is 2023. Conversely, world oil supply growth in 2023 is set to slow by about 1 million barrels per day. Get this right. The projection in 2023 is that we need 101.7 million barrels per day, which is a growth of 1.9 million barrels per day. But in actual reality, we'll be producing 1 million barrels less per day. This is the gap. How are we addressing this? This is a scenario that faces us today. What are the other realities? Despite our low carbon ambition, the global energy mix is still dominated by fossil fuels, which accounts for 87% of energy consumption. What is more interesting is the cost. What is the cost for this transition? Globally, if net zero is to be achieved by 2050, this is what they say, right, Prime Minister Rowley? This is what we have committed ourselves to. If net zero is to be achieved by 2050, we all would love that. The investment gap per year in renewable energy in emerging and developing economies is US 1.35 trillion. Reality. If we are to achieve net zero by 2050, there's a set of action that is required, that requires investment. The gap, I'm not speaking about the capital formation, the gap to achieve this in an annualized way is 1.35 trillion US dollars for emerging and developing economies. let us come closer to home. But before I come closer to home, let me make this other point. One of the major disincentive for solar now, and I'm just raising these issues because we have to answer these questions. We cannot speak about net zero without answering these questions. We want it. We are together on this. But let us just not name targets without supporting it with the answers. So let us look at the banks who are supposed to finance this. First of all, the banks are limiting their long-term loans as their liability duration impedes them from lending to the sector for the long term. That is solar. Why? Because there's a refinancing risk for the borrower. So what this causes? The solar needs what is termed long-term debt financing. You have a region, Prime Minister already made the point, that is already heavily indebted. Who is now going to lend you the long-term financing because we know the capital cost for solar? I'm not asking these questions in a negative way. We just are asking the questions to get the answer because we want to be part of this. So let's see what is the reality is now in the CARICOM region. Net power generation is expected to increase by more than 70%. If CARICOM is to realize its own target that we have committed ourselves to in terms of renewable, what does it require? Prime Minister Rowley gave you the numbers in terms of the power generation by the sector. But it requires investment of $11 billion to realize the achievable renewable energy target. That is what CARICOM, we have committed ourselves to. To get to this target, it requires investment of $11 billion. Guess what is the committed investment so far? Make a guess. Well, you're just, as I am, silent on the matter. Where is the $11 billion coming from? Who is investing $11 billion? Why can't we answer these questions? And I have another question. We are in support and we are transitioning to renewable. But where is the assessment? So I know a number of prime ministers who have made commitment on moving to EVs in the public transportation system. One prime minister told me I made a commitment and the next day I made a call to place an order for EVs. And then it told me 10 years down the line, maybe 5 years down the line. This is the reality. We can't be pushed into an environment to make political commitment when in reality we cannot realize those targets unless we are asked to continuously mislead the population. That is why when we came into office, immediately we reassessed some targets that were committed to. In a very frank and open way, we said that these are not targets that are achievable because we are nowhere close to building infrastructure to achieve the targets. How do we, in this global environment, get the capital that is required to move to renewable? We can't get it by saying to the oil company, you have to shut down in 10 years or 20. We have all agreed that oil and gas, the shelf life is nowhere close to what some people believe it is. So how do we sit around a table and say, listen, if we have 70 years, 80 years in oil and gas, how do we find a formula in which you will now rework your business model to stay sustainable after 70 years? How is it you can take some of your net profit and start to invest it in renewables? How is it you can help in the research and development to reduce your emission level? More realistic conversation. But this requires all of us now to be around the table. This requires all of us to be around the table. You know, there is a lot of talk about Guyana's PSA. And recently I made the point that governments have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the country. We came into government and met what we have said publicly is a lopsided agreement. But we have a responsibility to honor an agreement that was made. I spoke about the consequences of walking away. I saw a completely different headline from what I said. That's okay. That's a function of democracy, not accuracy. I said then that we must think. And that is what responsible policy making is about. Let us say we stop production tomorrow. We stop all the production tomorrow. What is the consequence? What is the exposure to the country? What is the exposure? All those who've invested in a part, and this is not only the big investors who took a loan, built apartments, new hotels going up. The man who had 3 taxis and invested in 200 taxis now. What is the exposure to them? And then what is the exposure to the financial institutions that finance investment based on projection? So what we did was say, we have something that was already signed. We agree, we're going to efficiently manage it to extract as much benefit as possible. And all future agreements are going to be different. And we have not only said it, but you have the new agreements that are not only substantially different, but are comparable to the best terms for the government, whilst at the same time not locking out investment in the sector. Because there must be a balance. You cannot set terms and conditions that lock out investment, especially when we are going to an auction now. And that is what we have put to the table. We heard also about the energy corridor. Roraima, the northernmost state of Brazil, is the only state that is outside of their national grid. And Prime Minister Rowley pointed to the regional opportunity. I just want to give some stats here. So Roraima is the only state outside of Brazilian national grid. So in order to generate electricity, they have to transport fossil fuel with trucks from Manaus, the capital of the neighboring state of Amazonas. 780 kilometers from Bovista to the capital of Roraima. This year alone, the federal government will have to subsidize electricity in the state of Roraima by $2.3 billion US. That is what the federal state will give to the state of Roraima as a subsidy for the generation of electricity. $2.3 billion for a population in that state of 3 million persons in a country with a population of 14 million people. That is the cost of putting power to the homes. That is the cost of putting power to the homes. Now, what are the opportunities in natural gas? According to the Minister of Finance mid-year report, so I'm quoting the Minister of Finance here. If he is wrong, then you'll find problems with him. According to the Minister of Finance mid-year report, Guyana's estimated recoverable gas reserve is 17 trillion cubic feet, making the country one of the largest holders of natural gas reserves in the region. Neighboring Venezuela is approximately 200 trillion cubic feet of proven natural gas reserves. The Guyana-Suriname Basin, it is estimated to have more than 30 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Trinidad and Tobago has proven reserves of natural gas of 10 trillion cubic feet and an estimated potential of 23 trillion cubic feet. Is that right, Prime Minister? Now, it takes 54 trillion cubic feet of gas to produce 7.3 million gigawatt hours of energy. With a combined estimated electricity needs for CARICOM and Roraima of some 40,000 gigawatt hours, the combined gas potential of Guyana, I'm just sticking to electricity, of Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago alone can provide energy for more than 100 years. That is a regional perspective of the potential that we have in natural gas transition. Government recognizing this, recognizing that we must build a national development ecosystem that focuses on food production, on energy security, and on climate security, not only for Guyana, but for the rest of the world. It's taken a number of steps. We started 2.5 years ago importing all our corn. I'm giving you one example. All our corn and soya for feed in Guyana. We set ourselves a target of becoming self-sufficient in 5 years. Not only are we well on our way in becoming self-sufficient, but we might be in a position to export to the region for the first time. We are not talking about food security in an idle manner. We've embarked on a number of initiatives, including the new youth entrepreneurial program, making agriculture and food production more attractive, using technology, providing investment infrastructure, to the extent that we are very confident that in another 3 to 4 years, we will be a major supplier of food to the region. But more important is the short-term initiative. Because as Prime Minister Rauli and Gonzalez and the President said, one of the things about oil is that it raises expectation and people want immediate benefit. Not only are we investing in the critical mass of infrastructure to lead the transformation and open up the new lands and give a higher quality of life. And when I say higher quality of life, what do I mean? By the time we get to 2025, we'll move to a position where more than 90% of the population along the coast have access to treated water. That is, you can turn on the tap and drink the water from the tap. We're moving to a position where 100% of our teachers will be trained teachers regardless of where they are in the hinterland. We're moving to a position of 12 new hospitals, an electronic patient management information system, an electronic data management information system that support the technological revolution in Guyana. An investment of more than $100 million in skills training, skills development, building technical capability and capacity, not only for the oil and gas sector, but for the new, modern, dynamic, diversified economy that we are building. We are moving to a position where we'll have universal access to secondary education. This is the investment that leads to the human transformation. But at the same time, we understand that we have to build out an economy that brings new entrants into the business environment. We cannot do that by writing headlines. You have to do that by real work, doing real work, understanding policies and understanding where we're going as a country. One of the greatest impediments to national development in Guyana has been and continues to be the cost of energy. Continues to be the cost of energy and the reliability of energy. Fortunately for us, in 2 years, in record time, we have been able to put together a project, the natural gas project, the energy project, in record time that meet, let me make this very clear, that meet every aspect of international scrutiny and transparency that will cut the cost of energy by half before the end of 2025. That is real work. That is real work. Let me make it very clear. Every aspect of this project was made public. Painstaking technical work led by the Vice President to realize the potential of our country. Have no mistake, every single contract under this project will be made publicly available. We have been speaking about it at the appropriate time. You're not living in an environment and operating in an environment with amateurs. Have you ever negotiated something complex? No, this reminds me, Prime Minister Rowley, of the hydro project. Many persons today who are shouting from the top of the mountains. There's a hymn like that, Ralph. I know that hymn too. About, oh, why go gas? What about the potential of hydro? More than a decade ago, close to now, the then government, who's in office now, painstakingly got investors to come here for the investment of hydro, the Milas Falls Hydro Project. You know, President Duque, you spoke about hydro. There are some in the society who said, oh, this is environmentally damaging at that time. At that time, they said that. You know what they did? They killed a good project. An international investor walked away. An international investor walked away. Today, that project would have been completed and the people of Guyana would have been receiving electricity at half the price, not 2 years from now. It would have happened a long time ago. So when we speak about development and transformation and the positioning of Guyana, it's not guesswork. It is careful, calculated policy making aimed at transforming things. It calls for big thinking. First of all, before you have big thinking, you have to have ideas. We have to develop ideas. The LCDS is not an idea. The LCDS is a demonstration of a practical document that, let me be very clear on this, and President Dugue, you will hear me out on this. Guyana's position is to make the LCDS a global model for development, for sustainable development. The LCDS is no longer a Guyana document. We are embarking on a mission to make the LCDS a global model for sustainable development. Because we know what the LCDS is capable of. And whilst we have the fanciful talk about how do you help indigenous people, Prime Minister Rowley, on Wednesday, because of what the LCDS has earned for Guyana, on Wednesday, Tushaus, leaders of our Amerindian villages, will receive a check in their hands for the people of those villages as a result of the LCDS and what it has earned for our country. And we are not telling them to do A, B, and C. They have a check for the development of their community. And yet there are some. You think it's easy? This is a complex task here we have. There are some who say to some of the Tushaus, don't pick up the check, leave it. But I want to see which Tushau is not going to pick up the check and explain to the people that we didn't pick up the check. Almost 100% support of the LCDS. On one hand, you say, how do we enhance the livelihood of people? And here is a model that shows you not only how we are enhancing it, but we are making it sustainable. On the other hand, the same people who are saying that on the other hand saying, don't bother with that thing, boy, don't collect that thing. But we have a task ahead of us, and that is to develop this country. The opportunities are enormous. Let me be very clear. The opportunities in Guyana are enormous. And in the region, those persons who are part of the opportunities here and who are investing now will realize that if you don't make the investment now, the cost of investment 2 to 3 years from now will be far more than it is today. You see, I made another point recently. There are developers along the coastline doing shore base, more than $25 billion Guyana dollars of investment in the last 2.5 years along the shore base. Much of it is a result of what is taking place in the oil and gas sector. More than $25 billion of investment. But you know what? For almost 3 years, those very investors were waiting for permits and approval to make that investment. Creating thousands of jobs in 2 years, in 2 months, sorry. All the permits were granted, unlocking $25 billion Guyana dollars of investment in 2 years. Many of the investors sit here. That is the difference between bad policy making and good policy making. Basically, it's the difference between bad governance and good governance. But what does it mean What does it mean for the private sector? And that is why I said that the private sector must speak. If you were able to invest 3 years ago, you would have saved 20% of your investment costs that you pay today, because the cost of investment, cost of infrastructure went up by that. So you suffer, everyone suffers. We have to operate in a realistic environment. We have to make decisions based on the realities that we are faced with, ensuring that the people of this country have the best possible social services. The social safety nets are there to secure the vulnerable, best world-class education, world-class health services, world-class infrastructure, and an economy that stands on many different footing, positioning Guyana to be a global leader on food security, a global leader on climate services, a global leader in energy. That is where we're taking Guyana in an economy 2040. And make no mistake, we are going to remove every blockage to unlock the full potential of this country in those areas and building out those areas. I don't think I need to be more clear on the direction of the country and where we're going. The investment in agriculture has enormous potential in Guyana. CARICOM market alone. The CARICOM market alone is tens of millions of US dollars in a market that is absolutely accessible to you. Creating the incentives, the investment vehicle. We're working on ways in which we can make the cost of capital lower. Our housing program for capital is one of the strongest housing programs in the region. One of the strongest housing programs. As demand has increased, the lending rate has decreased by 2 percentage points in 2 years. Against a world in which the lending rate for housing is increasing, 2 percentage points. Low income rate is now less than 3.5% in Guyana. As a result of our investment in agriculture, one of the largest loans by a regional banking institution will be made for the first time in the production of corn and soya right here in Guyana, for a local consortium that was brought together. Now let me address one other issue. Local content is important for any country. Local content is not inhibitive to investment. Let me make that very clear. Local content is not inhibitive to foreign investment. If you look at our laws and our safeguards in terms of parity for foreign investors and local investors, in terms of foreign investment and local investment, you will see that there is great parity. There is great protection. For the first time in our country history, we have an investment portfolio that spans many partners, bilateral and international partners. We have the US, we have the UK, we have India, we have Austria, we have China. All of them are part of financing transformative projects in Guyana. The investors' confidence in the country is very high. And is high because there is predictability of policy. It is high because there is a clear path that we are taking to national development. It is high because there is a clear strategy as to what we are doing and how we are doing it in positioning Guyana. You see, we have consistently said oil and gas is not the answer. What it does is give us much needed revenue to catalyze the other sectors, to incentivize the other sectors, to make them competitive globally, to create a framework, that would allow these sectors to grow and expand, to contribute to national development. That is what it does for us. Now, we recognize that in creating this new Guyana, that we must be able to address institutional issues, governments, and the way in which government administers business must change. So we are embarking on a deliberate strategy to reduce bureaucracy and remove bureaucracy in many instances. Use technology as a tool to increase efficiency and reduce cost of doing business. And that is important for investors. That investment is key in making the country a competitive environment for global investment. And we're working on that also. We're also working on the external variables, the cost of capital, climate and environmental challenges, health, energy, food. Those are external variables that affect us, drive up inflation, and we are working on a strategy to address all of this. In this presentation, I do not have the time to go through each area, but I'm sure over the course of this conference that you will find presentations that address each sector. But more importantly, for investors, the government has set up a help desk here that will guide you, that can connect you. And the Vice President himself, as you heard earlier, we have to leave early tomorrow for heads of government meeting in Bahamas. But the Prime Minister and Vice President and ministers are going to be here throughout this conference at your service to answer questions, to have any detail or more elaborated presentation that you may need on the opportunities that we have. In 2 years, because of the investment and strategy that we have pursued, we now have a local company for the first time that has inked contracts with regional partners, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Barbados, for the building of more than 1,000 prefabricated houses for the region. This is not guesswork. This is deliberate policy making that is bringing benefit and incentive. Further than that, for the first time, we are able to provide a holistic solution to a regional partner when we talk about regional integration. In the case of St. Vincent, we did not only bring together the producers and the manufacturers of the prefab homes, but we brought together a local financial institution that has signed an agreement to finance those homes for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, expanding our market. There's some exciting news in the mining sector that we're hoping will come soon. There are exciting news in the fishery sector. There's exciting news in the area of human resource transformation. We have committed ourselves in building a human resource pool that is highly skilled, highly functional, not only to meet our national needs, but building out human resource talent to complement companies that would be able to compete and bid for projects regionally and globally. That is the swing that we want. Not only building the local capacity to function locally, but how do we ensure the local capacity can now compete globally? We are thinking big. We are acting strategically to match the big ideas and the big thinking in transforming our country. All are welcome in a free and democratic society, in a society in which the government believes strongly in the rule of law, the advancement of democracy, and the fulfillment of good governance. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, President Ali. If I could just ask you to sit for a moment, please, so that we could deal with some housekeeping matters. Those persons who are heading for the doors, could I ask you to hold, please? Could someone hold the doors, please? Please hold the doors. Thank you. Thank you. Please hold the doors. His Excellency President Ali and the delegations will now be going downstairs. And I'd like to ask everyone to just remain seated to allow President Ali, Prime Ministers Gonzalez and Rowley, His Excellency President Duque, the members of the Diplomatic Corps, all persons in white seats, as well as the members of the cabinet. If you could leave now, please, and head with President Ali to the arch downstairs. Everyone else, if you could just hold your positions, please, I would appreciate it very much. Thank you. For those of us who are remaining, just some quick announcements. You would recognize that because of the time, we'd have to make some quick adjustments in the program. We were supposed to be going to a break now, and then there's a session on Guyana's energy policy to be led by Vice President Jagdeo between the break and lunch. We have to decide whether this is break or whether this is lunch. Yeah, I hear the shouts for lunch, but lunch was supposed to be ready for 1. So I don't know yet if lunches are ready. So you need to give us some time to figure this out. In the meantime, I know that the items for the break are available now. So after these announcements, you're invited to participate in the break just outside the room. And then we will provide you with information about whether we start the session or whether we go to lunch and then have that session. We do have participants in that session who may need to travel. And so that's one of the reasons why we have to wait and make that announcement. But we'll get back to you on that in a few minutes. Thank you very much. Also, for those of you who are trying to access the internet, our partner, GT&T Business Solutions, is providing internet free of cost. There's a QR code that you could scan. Otherwise, there's a password here that you could use to connect to the Wi-Fi. And you should see signs like these around the conference area that you could use to access GT&T's free Wi-Fi today and every day for the rest of the conference. Thank you.